There's the age-old question of should trust be earned or should trust be given? And I believe that trust should be given, in part because trust is a physiological experience.
That's Tracy LaLonde, a professional development leader with over 30 years of experience in training, consulting, and professional development. She worked in 3 very large law firms and then became a partner in a consulting firm teaching lawyers how to develop business. She is the author of Trust Me, The Insider's Guide to Being the Go-To Person at Work, which was published in November 2024. You're listening to Dear Human Resources, and I'm your host, Germain. In this episode, Tracy is going to talk about how to repair broken trust in the workplace. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you for having me.
So in the workplace specifically, how is trust typically broken? And can you give us some examples?
Sure. I find there are 6 elements of trust: competence, openness, integrity, empathy, empowerment, and consistency. And so folks can break trust when they don't live into those 6 elements. So, for example, openness, that is about being transparent and communicative. So when we make a mistake and we don't tell anyone about it, or we try to hide it. Competence, this is about mistakes. So making mistakes when we have the skill set that we shouldn't be making those kinds of mistakes, and trust can break. Integrity is about doing what you say you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. So those are some examples of how trust can be broken.
So when trust is broken, emotions typically run quite high. What are the first steps a leader of HR can take to repair that trust, both on an individual level and within teams as well?
It's tough because you've hit on it, that emotions can run high because trust is a risk and it is a deeply emotional situation. And so I'm trying to help folks not automatically write off the other person when their trust has been broken. And I find that if you're the person whose trust has been broken, it's critical to also participate in the repair. Because lots of times we feel like the person who's done the breaking of the trust, all the responsibility is upon them. And I want it to be a two-way street. So first, if my trust has been broken, I have to discern what's happened. What is it about the performance of this person that I don't trust? So for example, if you and I are working together and you're working on a task, your quality might be great, but maybe you missed the deadline. So I can no longer trust your time management. I need to discern that difference, that it's the timeliness that I'm struggling with trusting. And then I need to talk to you about it. Lots of times we don't tell people when they've broken our trust. We let them live in this cloud. And then we need to talk about how to repair it. And I need to continue to give you opportunities to earn back the trust as it relates to the time management piece.
So I think confrontation is very uncomfortable. And telling someone you broke their trust must be quite challenging for many people, especially in teams and when you work remotely. In workplaces where trust has been eroded over time, rebuilding can feel quite overwhelming. Can you give us some strategies for shifting the overall culture towards trustworthiness and transparency?
I think first it needs to start at the top, either the very top or the top layers. So as you talk about transparency and trustworthiness, it's all about communication, which transparency is a part of that. And so communicating with people, not only the what, but often the why. And let's take, for a recent example, all the return to office strategies and things like that. When businesses were suddenly, quote unquote, mandating that employees come back into the office, it felt arbitrary. It felt like we didn't trust them to be able to do their jobs from another location. And so we need to share with folks why coming back into the office is important for whatever reasons that may be important to that business, as an example. So that's one. Second is we have to extend trust. There's the age-old question of should trust be earned or should trust be given? And I believe that trust should be given, in part because trust is a physiological experience. if I decide to extend trust to you, and it maybe it's small ways at first, that releases oxytocin in your brain. And then that incents you, that's the bonding or love hormone, and that incents you to trust me in return. So we get this nice reciprocal trusting situation going back and forth. So we have to talk about it, show transparency, and then we have to give opportunities for people to be trustworthy.
It reminds me of an article I published in the early 2010s, and it was about building trust in teams. And I was saying in the research paper that one way to build trust is to give trust, which is exactly what you said. And I talked about swift trust. In other words, when you have to work on a project in a team and you don't really have time to build trust, you just have to trust and trust to give trust and trust that people are not going to break it. And
Yeah.
which is exactly what you said. So in your book, Trust Me, you emphasize being the go-to person at work. Can you explain how trust plays into becoming that person, that go-to person, and why it's so critical in professional relationships?
Well, trust is an interesting phenomenon. Lots of times people treat it as a character trait. You either are trustworthy or you aren't. And I view it as a skill. And it's a skill or like a muscle to be developed like any other. And so it takes time, to be a trustworthy individual. But I find that once you show that you are worthy of another person's trust or you build the confidence, then that can take you lots of places. And in particular in a career, just like any other skill, that's going to elevate you. And in many ways, this is the skill that you can control fully and 100%. Because if you work in a technical area, it may be that the projects don't come along or they come along slowly or different kinds of things manifest in order for you to develop your technical skills, as an example. But you can be trustworthy every day with every interaction. So I view trustworthiness as empowering for folks that if they really kind of dive into this idea and dive into the concepts of the book specifically, that they'll be seen and viewed as trustworthy, which will only open the door to continued opportunities, continued responsibility, and if they so desire, leadership opportunities in the long term.
Do you have any actionable advice or tools that can be used to navigate trust and mistakes?
Yeah, it's interesting with mistakes. I try to help people think about, is a mistake a blip or is it a blunder? And not surprisingly, typically how someone handles a mistake will drive a lot of that dynamic. So people can assess. I have a matrix in the book where people can assess whether it's a blip or a blunder. And there's two dynamics for that. There's the severity of the mistake, which includes things like consequence. So is it super costly? Does it have a big impact or not? Visibility. So was the mistake just between us, or did the mistake get sent out to the entire company? And reputation, so how impactful or damaging is the mistake on either an individual's reputation or the company or business's reputation? And then the other dynamic is conduct, which includes things like competence. So is this a mistake that someone should have the skill to not make? Or are they new and they're learning? And so we expect mistakes to be happening. Second is openness. So if I made the mistake, do I tell you or do I hide it? How someone communicates that mistake really goes a long way. And then finally is empathy. So do I care that I made the mistake? Do I feel empathetic for the discomfort or the hassle factor that it's caused you? And so identifying where the mistake falls on my blip to blunder continuum is kind of that first step. And then second is the feedback discussion conversation that I talked about earlier as it relates to repairing.
The last question I have for you is actually more about your professional trajectory, if you will. You became a partner in a consulting firm teaching lawyers how to develop business. Why did you decide to choose that particular area of business, like the legal?
I have a 30-year career in training and development generally, and the first 10 of those was in the high-tech consulting space. And then I happened to take a training and development job within one of those large law firms. And it was just eye-opening in a whole nother context of how people learn. because I thought, don't lawyers learn the law in law school? And turns out they learn the law, but they don't actually learn how to practice or
Yeah.
any of those other communication skills or things like that. And for 10 of those years, I was a partner in this consulting firm teaching lawyers how to develop business and basically with sales, in part because I found that they really had no idea what to do. And I'm a person who believes in helping people live into their full potential. And at that time in the law firm world, this was 2006 to 2016, in order for a lawyer to be successful at a large firm, they really had to figure out how to generate revenue. Being a good lawyer was no longer enough. And so it took me down that path for a while. And now I've expanded out into talking about other types of topics like trust and engagement and great people management.
Do you think lawyers have problems with trust? Perhaps because of the nature of their work?
They are trained and hired to be risk adverse. So, yes, they do.
Meaning?
Well, meaning that, well, I always ask the question, should trust be earned or should trust be given? And the large majority feel that the trust should be earned. So they are
Yeah.
too skeptical to give it right away.
Yeah, I can see that, definitely. Thank you very much, Tracy, for your insights. It was great having you on the show and a fantastic topic, too.
Thank you, Merlin. I appreciate it.
Support for this show comes from Western Carolina University, a campus of the University of North Carolina system, with the technical assistance of Kelly Minnis.